everyone, welcome back to another episode of Reading Rainbows, where we are reading Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. I'm trying something a little different. As you can see, I have a microphone. I'm hoping that this will help to pick up my voice a little bit better, because I know that I can be a little quiet sometimes. And let's get started. We are reading Chapter 18, Treasure Island. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the rest of these gentlemen having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island, from the beginning to the end, keeping nothing back but the bearings of the island, I take up my pen in the year of grace 17 blank, and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn, and the brown old seaman, with the sabre cut, first took up his lodging under our roof. Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island. And so Maggie heard her father read aloud, for the first time in 9 years, in a draughty old church. Even many, many years later, the smell of burnt paper would come back to her as soon as she opened one of the books from which he had read that awful morning. It was chilly in Capricorn's church. Maggie was to remember that later, too. Although the sun must have been hot outside and high in the sky by the time Mo began to read, he simply sat down on the floor where he was, legs crossed, one book on his lap and the others beside him. Maggie quickly knelt down close to him before Basta could catch hold of her. "Here, get up these steps, all of you," Capricorn told his men, "and take the woman with you, Flatnose. Only Basta stays where he is." Eleanor resisted, but Flatnose merely seized a handful of her hair and hauled her along after him. "Ow! I'm sorry, but getting your hair pulled hurts like hell. That's why I prefer mine short. Mine is way too long as it is right now. I much prefer it short, harder to grab hold of." Capricorn's men climbed the steps and sat at their master's feet, Eleanor among them like a pigeon with ruffled feathers in the middle of a mob of marauding crows. I'm just getting a visualization of that, that pigeon all ruffled up and grumpy. I challenge my readers, anyone, my listeners, I guess. I challenge you to come up with a picture, Photoshop it, find it, draw it, however you want to do it. I want a picture of, Eleanor, in amongst Capricorn's men, keeping in mind this visualization of a pigeon with ruffled feathers amongst the crows. I want to see this. Who can get this for me? Please. The only person who looked equally out of place was the thin reader, Darius, who was sitting at the very end of the row of black-clad men and kept fiddling with his glasses. Mo opened the book on his lap and began leafing through it, frowning as if searching the pages for the goal he was to read out of it for Capricorn. "Cockerel, you will cut out the tongue of anyone who utters the slightest sound while Silvertongue is reading," said Capricorn, and Cockerel drew a knife from his belt and looked along the row of men as if already selecting his first victim. All was so deathly quiet inside the red church that Maggie thought she could hear Basta breathing behind her. But perhaps it was only the sound of her own fear. Judging by their faces, Capricorn's men seemed to be feeling far from happy. They were looking at Mo with expressions of apprehension mingled with dislike. Maggie understood that only too well. Perhaps one of them would soon vanish into the book through which Mo was leaping so undecidedly. Had Capricorn told them that such a thing might happen? Did even he know it? What if she herself vanished, as Mo obviously feared? Or Eleanor? "Maggie," Mo whispered to her as if he had heard her thoughts, "hold on to me tight any way you can." Maggie nodded and clutched his sweater, as if that would be any use. "Yes, I think I've found the right place," said Mo into the silence. He cast a last glance at Capricorn, looked at Eleanor, cleared his throat, and began to read. Everything disappeared. The red walls of the church, the faces of Capricorn's men, Capricorn himself sitting in his chair. There was nothing but Moe's voice and the pictures forming in their minds from the letters on the page, like the pattern of a carpet taking shape on a loom. If Maggie could have hated Capricorn any more, she would have done so now. It was his fault that Moe had never once read aloud to her in all these years. To think of the magic he could have worked in her room with his voice, a voice that gave a different flavor to every word, made every sentence a melody. Even Cockerel had forgotten his knife and the tongues he was supposed to cut out, and was listening with a faraway expression on his face. Flatnose was staring into space, enraptured as if a pirate ship with all sails set were truly cruising in through one of the church windows. The other men were equally entranced. Yeah, I can just imagine that, To me, it's like reading in front of a room full of preschoolers. All of them, grumpy and I don't want to be here. And, maybe muttering and, picking at each other and whatever. And then you begin to read. And all goes quiet as everyone's just absorbed into the story. Just listening and the pictures forming in their minds. Yeah, I've seen it happen with a room full of preschoolers, and to me that's what I'm visualizing here with Capricorn and his men. There was not a sound to be heard but Moe's voice bringing the letters and words on the page to life. Only one member of his audience seemed immune to the magic of it. Face expressionless, pale eyes fixed on Moe, Capricorn sat there waiting for the clink of coins amidst the harmony of the words, for chests of damp wood heavy with gold and silver. Moe did not keep him waiting long. It happened as he was reading what Jim Hawkins, a boy not much older than Maggie when he embarked on his terrifying adventure, saw in a dark cave. Georges and Lewises, doubloons and double guineas, and I'm probably going to mess this up. Moidores and sequins, the pictures of all the kings of Europe for the last 100 years. Strange oriental pieces stamped with what looked like wisps of string or bits of spider's web, round pieces and square pieces, and pieces bored through the middle, as if to wear them round your neck. Nearly every variety of money in the world must, I think, have found a place in that collection, and for number I am sure they were like autumn leaves, so that my back ached with stooping and my fingers with sorting them out. The maidservants were cleaning the last crumbs off the tables when coins suddenly came rolling over the bare wood. The women stumbled back, dropping their wiping cloths and pressing their hands to their mouths as the coins tumbled and leapt about their feet. Gold, silver, and copper coins jingled over the flagstone floor, clinking as they gathered in heaps under the benches. More and more and more of them. Some rolled as far as the steps. Capricorn's men came to life, bent to pick up the glittering little things bouncing off their boots, but then snatched back their hands. None of them dared touch the magic money, for what else could it be? Gold made of paper and printer's ink, and the sound of a human voice. When the shower of gold stopped, at the very moment Moe closed the book, Maggie saw there was a little sand among the gleaming, glittering money. A few iridescent blue beetles scuttled away, and the head of an emerald green lizard emerged from a heap of tiny coins. And if you look at the cover of the book, you see the coins and the emerald green lizard. It stared around with fixed eyes, tongue flicking out of its sharp little mouth. Basta threw his knife at it, as if he could skewer not just the lizard, but the cowardice that had seized them all. However, Meggie gave a warning cry, and the lizard darted away so fast that the tip of the blade struck the stones. Buster ran over to his knife, picked it up, and pointed it threateningly in Maggie's direction. "Oh, come on, don't threaten the child just because she doesn't want you to, kill a lizard." God. Capricorn rose from his chair, his face still as cold and blank as if nothing worth getting excited about had happened, and clapped his ringed hands graciously. "Not bad for a start, Silvertongue," he said. "See that, Darius? That's what gold looks like, not the rusty, dented metal you've read out of books for me. But now you've heard how the thing is done, I hope you'll have learned from it, just in case I ever require your services again." Darius did not reply. His eyes were fixed on Mo with such admiration in them that it wouldn't have surprised Meggie had he flung himself at her father's feet. When Mo straightened up, Darius approached him hesitantly. Capricorn's men were still gazing at the gold as if they didn't know what to do next. "What are you standing there for, gaping like a lot of sheep?" cried Capricorn. "Pick it up! Go on!" "That was wonderful!" Darius whispered to Mo, while Capricorn's men cautiously began shoveling the coins into bags and boxes. His eyes were gleaming behind his glasses like the eyes of a child who has just been given a much-wanted present. "I've read that book many times," he said in a voice that shook, "but I never saw it all as vividly as I did today. And I didn't just see it. I smelled it, the salt and the tar and the musty odor of the whole accursed island." "Treasure Island! Heavens above, I was petrified!" Eleanor appeared behind Darius, pushing him impatiently aside. Excuse me. Flatnose had obviously forgotten her for the moment. "He'll be here any minute, that's what I kept thinking. Long John Silver will be here, lashing out at us with his crutch." Mo just nodded, but Meggie could see the relief on his face. "Here, take it," he told Darius, handing him the book. "I hope I never have to read out of it again. One shouldn't push one's luck." "You said his name not quite right every time," Meggie whispered. Mo tenderly stroked the bridge of her nose. "Ah, so you noticed," he whispered back. "Yes, I thought that might help. Perhaps the savage old pirate won't feel we're calling to him then," I told myself, "and he'll stay where he belongs. Why are you looking at me like that?" "Why do you think?" asked Eleanor, answering instead of Meggie. Why is she looking so admiringly at her father? Because no one ever read aloud like that, even apart from the money. I saw it all. The sea and the island as clear as if I could touch it, and I don't expect it was any different for your daughter." Yeah, in a way I sort of hope that that's what I managed to do, is when I'm reading that you're able to visualize everything clearly, but at the same time, I hope that I don't, because, heavens forbid I accidentally read Maggie out of her story. What would happen then, But seriously, movies are great and all, in giving a voice to books in a way, but, someone who is able to read clearly and, help to implant those pictures into someone's mind, just with the words on the page and their voice, is something that is amazing. I remember when I was in school, in elementary school, and, we'd have the books that we were reading in class, and, the teacher would be like, okay, we're going to go around the room and everyone's going to read a paragraph, or everyone's going to read a page, or whatever. And you had the kids who could read nice and smoothly and clearly through the page. And then you'd have those who would stumble and stammer over every other word, basically, and it just pulls you out of the story. All you're noticing is, what they're failing to say when you can see the words on the page, but, they're not able to bring the words out. And, I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I don't remember the book we were reading, but, we were reading a book, and it came to my turn to read. And I'm reading through it, and it was the first time I had ever seen the word damn written on the page. And I didn't connect D-A-M-N to the curse word damn. So, that was the only word that I stumbled over on the page. And, one of my classmates asked the teacher if they could just have me skip it. Or, maybe it's just because it was a curse word and, 3rd grade, so, 8 and 9-year-olds, I think it was. Ooh, it's a curse word. We're not supposed to say curse words. Yeah, that may have been the issue. I don't know exactly. But, I just remember my teacher saying, no, Rainbows is the best reader I have ever had in my class, and we should listen to her. And I know that now I stumble over words a little bit. It's because I don't talk much, so to be reading out loud is difficult for me. But I hope that I'm helping to bring this all to life for you. Mo had to smile. He kicked aside a few of the coins on the floor in front of him. One of Capricorn's men picked them up and surreptitiously pocketed them. As he did so, he looked at Mo as uneasily as if he feared a word from him might turn him into a frog or one of the beetles still crawling around among the coins. "They're afraid of you, Mo," whispered Meggie. She could see the trepidation even on Basta's face, although he was doing his best to hide it by assuming a particularly bored expression. Only Capricorn seemed to be left cold by what had happened. Arms folded, he stood there watching his men pick up the last of the coins. "How much longer is this going to take?" he asked finally. "Leave the small change where it is, and sit down again. And you, Silvertongue, open the next book." "The next book?" Eleanor's voice almost cracked with indignation. "What on earth's the idea of that? The gold your men are shoveling up there is enough to last you at least 2 lifetimes. We're going home now." She was about to turn around, but Flatnose, who had finally remembered he was meant to be guarding Eleanor, seized her arm roughly. Mo looked up at Capricorn. Basta, smiling unpleasantly, laid his hand on Maggie's shoulder. "Get on with it, Silvertongue," he said. "You heard. There are still plenty of books here." Mo looked at Meggie for a long time before bending to pick up the book he'd chosen first. Tales from the 1001 Nights. The book that goes on forever... The book that goes on and on forever, he murmured, opening it. "Did you know the Arabs say no one can read it right through to the end, Meggie?" She shook her head as she sat down beside him on the cold flagstones. Basta let her, but he planted himself right behind her. Meggie didn't know much about the 1001 Nights, except that it was really a book in many volumes. The copy that Darius had given Mo could only be a small selection. Were Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves in it, and Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp? Which story would Mo read? Meggie thought she saw contradictory feelings on the faces of Capricorn's men. Fear of what Mo might bring to life, and at the same time a wish, a yearning almost, to once more be carried away by his voice, transported far away to a place where they could forget everything, even themselves. There was no smell of salt and rum when Mo began reading this time. The air in Capricorn's church grew hot. Maggie's eyes began to burn, and when she rubbed them, she found sand sticking to her knuckles. Once again, Capricorn's men listened to Mo's voice with bated breath, as if they were turned to stone. Capricorn alone seemed to feel nothing of the magic, but his eyes showed that even he was spellbound. They were fixed on Mo's face, as unmoving as the eyes of a snake. His red suit made his pupils look even more washed out, and his body seemed tense, like a dog scenting its prey. But this time, Mo disappointed him. The words offered up no riches, none of the treasure chests, pearls, and swords set with precious stones that Mo's voice conjured up, shining and sparkling, until Capricorn's men felt as if they could pluck them from the air. Something else slipped out of the pages, though. Something breathing, a creature made of flesh and blood. A boy was suddenly standing between the still smoldering braziers where Capricorn had burned the books. Maggie was the only one to notice him. All the others were too absorbed in the story. Even Mo didn't see him. Far away as he was, somewhere in the sand and the wind as his eyes made their way through the labyrinth of letters. The boy was some 3 or 4 years older than Maggie. The turban around his head was dirty, his eyes dark with fear in his brown face. He blinked and rubbed them as if he could wipe it all away. The wrong picture, the wrong place. He looked around the church as if he had never seen a building before, and how could he have? There wouldn't be any churches with spires in his story, or green hills like those he would see outside. The robe he wore went down to his brown feet, and in the dim light of the church it shone blue as a patch of the sky. Maggie wondered, what will happen when they see him? He's certainly not what Capricorn was hoping for. But Capricorn had already noticed the boy. "Stop!" he commanded, so sharply that Mo broke off at mid-sentence and raised his head. Abruptly and rather unwillingly, Capricorn's men returned to reality. Cockerel was the first on his feet. "Hey, where did he come from?" he growled. The boy ducked, looked around with a terrified expression, and ran for it, doubling back and forth like a rabbit, but he didn't get far. 3 men immediately sprang forward and caught him at the feet of Capricorn's statue. Yeah, imagine the terror of this boy, He's doing whatever he does in his story, and all of a sudden, he's someplace else. In this building, the likes of which he's never seen before. Yeah, he doesn't understand what's going on, and he's surrounded by people. And, all of a sudden, one of these people shouts, "Stop!" And you can tell just from a look that these are not people you want to sit and have a chat with. That must be terrifying. Mo put the book down on the flagstones beside him and buried his face in his hands. "Hey, Fulvio's gone!" cried one of Capricorn's men. "Vanished into thin air!" They all stared at Mo. There it was again, nervousness in their faces, but this time mingled not with admiration, but with anger. "Get rid of that boy, Silvertongue," ordered Capricorn angrily. "I have more than enough of his kind, and bring Fulvio back." Mo took his hands away from his face and stood up. "For the millionth time, I can't bring anyone back," he said. "The fact that you don't believe me doesn't make that a lie. I can't do it. I can't decide who or what comes out of a book, nor who goes into it." Maggie reached for Mo's hand. Some of Capricorn's men came closer, 2 of them holding the boy. They were pulling on his arms as if to tear him in half. Eyes wide with terror, the boys stared into their unfamiliar faces. "Back to your places," Capricorn ordered the angry men. couple of them were already dangerously close to Mo. "Why all this fuss? Have you forgotten how stupidly Fulvio acted on the last job? We almost had the police down on us. So it's the right man to have gone. And who knows, perhaps this lad will turn out to have a talent for arson. All the same, I want to see pearls now, and gold and jewels. After all, they're what this story is all about, so let's have some." An uneasy muttering rose among the men. Nonetheless, most of them returned to the steps and perched once more on the worn treads. Only 3 still stood in front of Mo, staring at him with intense hostility. One of them was Basta. "Very well, so we can dispense with Fulvio," he said, not taking his eyes off Mo. "But who is this wretched wizard going to magic into thin air next time? I don't want to end up in some thrice accursed desert story and find myself going around in a turban all of a sudden." The men standing near him nodded in agreement and looked at Mo so darkly that Meggie almost stopped breathing. "Basta, I won't tell you again." Capricorn's voice sounded menacingly calm. "Let him go on reading, all of you, and anyone whose teeth start chattering with fear had better go outside and help the women with the laundry." Do you have to make these jokes and comments about how anyone who's afraid must be a woman, basically? Some of the men looked longingly at the church door, but none ventured to leave. Finally, even the 2 who had been standing beside Basta turned without a word and sat down with the others. "You'll pay for Fulvio yet," Basta whispered to Mo before he restationed himself behind Meggie again. Why couldn't he have disappeared, she thought. Okay, I'm sorry, but I've got one little quibble with the writing. Restationed himself behind Meggie again. You're being repetitive. If he's restationing himself, then we already know that he's doing it again. You should have either said, before he restationed himself behind Meggie, or before he stationed himself behind Meggie again. But saying restationed himself behind Meggie again is just being redundant. I'm sorry. End of quibble. The boy still hadn't uttered a sound. "Lock him up. We'll see if he can be of any use to us later," ordered Capricorn. The boy did not resist as Flatnose led him away. Apparently numb, he stumbled along as if he were still expecting to wake up. When would he realize this dream was never going to end? When the door closed behind the 2 of them, Capricorn returned to his chair. "Go on reading, Silvertongue," he said. "We still have a long day ahead of us." But Mo looked at the books lying at his feet and shook his head. "No," he said. "You saw. It happened again. I'm tired. Be content with what I've brought you from Treasure Island. Those coins are worth a fortune. I want to go home, and I never want to set eyes on you again." His voice sounded rougher than usual, as if he'd read too many words aloud. Capricorn looked at Mo appraisingly before turning his eyes to the bags and chests his men had filled with coins. He seemed to be working out how long their contents would keep him in comfort. "Yes, you're right," he said at last. "We'll go on tomorrow. Otherwise we might find a stinking camel turning up here next, or another half-starved boy." "Tomorrow?" Mo took a step toward him. "What do you mean? Aren't you satisfied yet? One of your men has disappeared already. Do you want to be next?" "I can live with the risk," replied Capricorn, unimpressed. His men leapt to their feet as he rose from his chair and walked slowly down the altar steps. They stood there like schoolboys, although some of them were taller than Capricorn, hands clasped behind their backs as if at any moment he might inspect their fingernails for cleanliness. Maggie couldn't help remembering what Basta had said. how young he himself had been when he had joined Capricorn, and she wondered whether it was out of fear or admiration that the men bowed their heads. Capricorn had stopped beside one of the bulging money bags. "Oh, I have a great many plans for you, Silvertongue, believe me," he said, putting his hand into the sack and running the coins through his fingers. "Today was just a test. After all, I had to convince myself of your talents with my own eyes and ears, right? I can certainly use all this gold, but tomorrow you're going to read something else out of a book for me." He strolled over to the boxes that had contained the books that were now burnt to ashes, and reached into one. "Surprise!" he announced, smiling as he held up a single book. It didn't look at all like the copy Meggie and Eleanor had brought him. It still had a brightly colored paper dust jacket with a picture that Meggie couldn't make out from a distance. "Oh, yes, I still have one," remarked Capricorn, scanning the uncomprehending faces with pleasure. "My own personal copy, you might say, and tomorrow, Silvertongue, you're going to read to me from it. As I was saying, I like this world of yours very much indeed, but there's a friend from the old days that I miss. I never let your substitute try his skill with my friend. I was afraid he might bring him here without a head or with only one leg. But now I have you, and you're a master of your art." Who's this friend that Capricorn wants Mo to read out of the book? Any friend of Capricorn's? He's got to be terrifying. Mo was staring incredulously at the book in Capricorn's hand as if he expected it to dissolve into thin air at any moment. "Have a rest, Silvertongue," said Capricorn. "Spare your precious voice. You'll have plenty of time for that, because I have to go away, and I won't be back till noon tomorrow. Take these 3 back to their quarters," he told his men. "Give them enough to eat and some blankets for the night. Oh yes, and get Mortola to bring him tea. That kind of thing works wonders on a horse-tired voice. Didn't you always swear by tea sweetened with honey, Darius?" He turned inquiringly to his old reader, who simply nodded and looked sympathetically at Mo. "Back to our quarters? Do you mean that hole where your man with the knife put us last night?" Eleanor's cheeks were flushed red, whether in horror or indignation Meggie couldn't guess. "This is wrongful detention. No, worse, abduction. That's it, abduction. Are you aware how many years in jail you'll get for it?" "You're just cluing in now that they've abducted you, Eleanor? You are an idiot." "Abduction." Basta savored the word. "Sounds good to me. Really good." Capricorn gave him a smile. Then he looked Eleanor up and down as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Basta," he said, "is this lady of any use to us?" "Not that I know of," replied Basta, smiling like a child who's just been given permission to smash a toy. Eleanor went pale and tried to step backward, but Cockerel barred her way and held her firmly. "What do we generally do with useless things, Basta?" asked Capricorn quietly. Basta went on smiling. "Stop that," Mo said angrily to Capricorn. "Stop frightening her at once, or I'm not reading you another word." With every appearance of indifference, Capricorn turned his back to him, and Basta kept smiling. Meggie saw Eleanor press a hand to her trembling lips and quickly went over to stand beside her. "She's not useless. She knows more about books than anyone else in the world," she said, holding Eleanor's other hand very tight. Capricorn turned around. The look in his eyes made Meggie shudder, as if someone were running cold fingers down her spine. His eyelashes were as pale as cobwebs. "Eleanor definitely knows more stories with treasure in them than that spineless reader of yours," Maggie stammered. "Definitely." Eleanor squeezed Maggie's fingers hard. Her own hand was damp with sweat. "Yes, absolutely, that's true," she said huskily. "I'm sure I can think of several more." "Well, well," was all Capricorn said, his curved lips tracing a smile. "We'll see." Then he gave his men a signal, and they made Eleanor, Maggie, and Mo file past the tables, past Capricorn's statue and the red columns, and out through the heavy door that groaned as they pushed it open. Outside, beyond the shadow of the church on the village square, the sun shone down from a cloudless blue sky, and the air was filled with scents of summer. It was as if nothing unusual had happened. So that's the end of Chapter 18. I thank you for joining me, and again, I'm sorry about, this long delay between videos, but first I was sick and it was hard for me to do any reading when I was constantly coughing and sneezing like every other paragraph. And then my husband got sick, and then we were on vacation for a week. So, things are just now starting to get back to normal. But, I promise I'm recording several videos, so I will have videos all for this week, and I will try to sort of get ahead, too, so that there won't be such a long delay between videos should life happen again. So, that's that. I hope you're all doing well, and I really hope you'll join me next time for Chapter 19. And have a great day.